Welcome all, welcome one, welcome all once again to the newest edition of the Absolute Truth, Absolutely podcast. Once again presenting this edition's topic for our audience, for our guests, Pastor Jesus Martinez, and I am his son, Giovanni del Cristo. I'm pretty sure you want to focus the listeners' attention, although they can't see it, but if you're watching this in the video format, you can see what you're about to highlight.
Honor where honor is due. And we do pay homage to St. John.
This is not St. John the Baptist.
No.
This is not St. John the disciple or the apostle.
No.
What
is St. John Roberts.
If you'll notice the caricature that you have so thoughtfully placed in our studios,
Yes.
in this edition, he is in a...
He sent this to me 4 years ago.
Oh, okay. I understand.
When he dissented, when he disagreed with that notion, that opportunity to bring down certain privileges that women that look to abort are looking for. In other words, he is the patron saint of those who flip-flop. Yes, 4 years ago, he was basically facing the same challenge, or, he had the opportunity to rule on a law that basically tells a provider of abortions, listen, you need a hospital that you can admit your patients and treat them there. And back then, 4 years ago, he said, when the other five said, no, that's too much of a burden for women, he was part of four that said, no, that's not that big of a burden. And now this time, he says it's too much of a burden. Although, Gio, he did say something interesting, that if he were asked to review this particular case, the Louisiana case, under another sort of set of circumstances, he would be willing to listen to that. But nevertheless, he is the patron saint of flip-floppers.
The patron saint of capitulating compromisers.
Yes.
Wherever the secular winds blow, that's where I go.
And so we dutifully pay homage, right?
Did you like that small poem, by the way? Wherever the secular winds blow, that is where I must go. But it's funny that we begin this program by mentioning him, because he is one of these people that I don't know who irritates me more, the rioters or the sanctimonious types. And he's one of these kinds. What do I mean by that? I think our audience will recognize them. These people whom give the impression, and that's the impression they want to leave with certain persons, is that they are thoughtful, intricate, self-reflecting people, that they are very altruistic, especially after they've thought through an issue, and that everyone else ought to listen and bow down to whatever it is that they have examined and used logic to arrive at, because they have this wonderful intellect that everyone ought to prostrate themselves before whatever it is that they have concluded. But the fact of the matter is that no matter how much sophistry or verbosity these individuals use, you can always find extreme faults with what they ultimately decide is right for everyone else, especially this individual whom is perched atop the Supreme Court.
I think he wants certain people, a group of people, to think that he is so crafty and so as to cut him some slack. Listen to what he said. I joined the dissent in Whole Woman's Health and continue to believe that the case was wrongly decided. He then pointed out that no party in June Medical has asked us to reassess the constitutional validity of Casey. So here Robert strongly suggests that he would be open to overruling Casey if a state asked him to. So my thinking is, most people will think flip-flopping. I happen to think he flip-flopped. This didn't have to go any further. Just shoot it down with the same boat. He says he calls balls and strikes, right? Mm-hmm. A ball back then was a ball. Now it's a strike. We don't get it. Saint of the flip-floppers. But if this is true, if this analysis holds true, then maybe he is willing to visit that. And I think this is a game that he plays, trying to tell the rest of the nation, I am so smart. I am so above you intellectually that if you will only look a little further into the things that I write, then you would see the cracks that I'm leaving open so that you can bring cases back to me and we'll look at them from another angle.
He's even saying that he's smarter than the rest of the judges on the Supreme Court. That's that elitism that a few people have denounced of the ivory tower, the people whom abide in the ivory towers of the university, tenured professor positions, judges and whatnot. Once they achieve these status symbols, these positions, they perch themselves up there and they think whatever I dictate is good for the rest of humanity.
So at this point, it seems like any obstacle, even small barriers, can now be placed there. Otherwise, it's an undue obstacle, a burden, if you will, for women who want to get an abortion. That's basically what it comes down to. But nevertheless,
And this is supposedly a conservative judge.
yes, yes, Mr. Bush is scratching his head even as he views our program.
Well,
Same Bush.
and probably asking
St. George.
asking the NSA to censor us, to keep an eye on us, and the CIA to kill us. Probably in all of the above.
Or maybe they can get Putin put a bounty on us.
Therefore, folks, as if you're watching this, you'll notice we have placed the caricature of St. John the Roberts on our studios here for the time being, because we want to honor him and his skewed intellect during this edition of the Absolute Truth, Absolutely podcast. Mind you, I think at this point, we've already disseminated a few of these editions, and I think our audience is not quite sure whether or not you have enough love lost for St. John the Roberts.
I hold a special place, a very special place in my heart for St. John.
Yes.
I do.
From what I heard the other day, the hellish majesty himself, we're talking about Satan, said that he had two places in particular reserved right next to each other in the infernal abyss. He says one person is already abiding there. The second has yet to arrive. He said John McCain is in the first place, and Chief Justice John the Roberts, what is it? The patron Saint John the Roberts will join him. That's right. We'll join him there soon enough.
I think you wanted to give a shout out to Mayor Lida Cruzen.
I wanted to give a shout out.
She's given to doxing her critics. Here's her name, the address, and the phone numbers. Get out there and do what you have to do to them. So
That's not a dog whistle?
No. But the protester said, no, we'll go visit your home. And out comes a couple with a pistol and what appears to be some kind of an automatic rifle.
Yeah.
And now the news are saying people are upset at the couple.
Why? For defending themselves?
Not only that, I believe.
So they're not supposed to defend themselves? The public is angry at a couple that is defending their property and themselves?
I think the group of 100 or so broke through a private fencing to get into those territories.
Oh.
And also, to their surprise, I believe St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken, has stand your ground laws. So that's why I thought you wanted to give them a shout out.
In that particular photo, it looks like they're standing their ground. Good for them.
Absolutely.
Good for them. It was funny because...
You know what I saw today? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was buying a few things for nourishment. I need nourishment.
And we're not speaking in this instance of the spiritual kind. We're speaking about the physical kind.
And so my wife and I were walking towards our car, and here comes a man in his late 30s. He's got his toddler in his arms, and he tells him, if you're going to live in this world, son, you best always carry a gun.
One of the best advices one can give.
I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and we both went, wow, that's early training.
So when it says in the Bible, rear your children in the discipline and the admonition of the Lord, It also includes firearms training.
Get him an early subscription to the NRA and membership to the NRA, right?
Although, speaking about capitulating compromisers,
yes,
I think we're going to have to place an image of Wayne LaPierre.
We will have to get a picture of Wayne.
We're going to have to place a caricature of Wayne LaPierre here in our studio.
In our Hall of Shame.
So we can officially call this area of the studio the pedestal of shame.
Yes,
If we put your
absolutely.
image here, you better believe that fire and brimstone are descending upon you.
Absolutely.
Well,
It was tight this week, though.
also,
It was a runoff at the end. At the end, we had John Bolton also.
you mean the man who doesn't seem to be able to keep the profits of his book, of his
right.
tell-all?
Me love war. Me love war.
That
Me love
guy.
myself. What?
That guy has not seen a single war that he doesn't like.
Absolutely.
What, you're telling me that we're bound to lose 1 million soldiers? Doesn't matter. Let's go to war.
He said there was a war on women.
I'd like to
You
join
heard
that.
about a war on women? He says, "Do we nuke them?"
What's in our arsenal? What can we use? Well, folks, what we have for you during this edition in particular, we don't necessarily have, I know some will criticize us for that. We don't necessarily have any prepared doctrinal teachings for our audience on this occasion, but
Maybe we
we've
can wage war on the people who criticize us.
It's true.
Bring in
we gotta
John
get Bolton, and then he'll write a tell-all. Yeah, it's we don't necessarily have anything that's prepared for our audience during this edition, but I think you and I have found throughout the years that whenever we put together these programs, whatever outlets that the Lord has given us to disseminate, sometimes it's best to just speak from the heart. Some of the best editions we believe that we have recorded and gone live with throughout the years have been those where we speak directly from the heart. And what we'd like to do during this edition is to speak about what our prognostications are, what our feelings are with respect to what is going to happen to the church in a post-COVID world. I think in order to understand our commentary throughout the next few minutes, we also have to give a context, a foundation to what we're about to mention so as to give clarity and certain qualifications, as it were, with what we're going to mention next. We heard just a few days ago, I think this past weekend, that California was sending some of its contact tracers to churches specifically to see if churches were abiding by dictator Newsom's, comrade Newsom's diktats in the state. We ourselves, over at Living Word Church this past weekend in Miami, Florida, we were snitched on by the local community, by some of the neighbors that are neighboring the church, and they called the city of Miami police, informing them that some of our congregants were not wearing masks as they entered into the sanctuary. Now, I don't know where some of the audience will stand with respect to COVID and the lockdowns and things, but I think it's become rather clear where we stand on these issues. I think we've made it abundantly clear that we are against the onerous Orwellian dictates and regulations that they have put in for what, in essence, has turned out to be nothing more than another flu season, if that, because the numbers are beginning to bear that it hasn't even reached the numbers, as it were, as it pertains to deaths for a typical flu season in the United States. Remember that during the 2018-2019 flu season, if my mind doesn't fail me now, more than 120,000 people died because of the flu in the United States, and no one batted an eye. No one asked for lockdowns. No one asked for contact tracing apps. No one asked for people to sign up to subscribe to government pay so as to snitch on their neighbors and fellow citizens and whatnot. As we've stated, all of this was instituted because it's a grand scheme by the left, by the secularists, to try to impede Trump to win again. The idea was to tank the economy any which way they could, because they know that the key to the president's reelection is the economic status of the run-of-the-mill American. And if they could tank the economy, then somehow they would damage his reelection chances. When that didn't necessarily work out, now they're appealing to scare tactics to see if people will stay home and not vote for Donald Trump. Well, what about the mail-in balloting situation? Come on, that's rife for fraud. It's evident that if they can't get people to stay home during election day, mail in your ballot so that the Democrat Party and its lackeys, they'll just take those ballots and turn it into votes for the Democrats. You have no proof for that. One of the most recent studies, we disseminated this recently, from 2008 through 2016 has showcased that millions, tens upon millions of ballots have been lost, simply lost, in the mail system through the United States Postal Service, that beacon of responsibility with the charge that has been given them. And we've also found the recent cases, one in Pennsylvania, if my mind doesn't fail me, another one recently in New Jersey, where there were 4 individuals indicted for taking ballots and switching the balloting from Republicans to Democrat votes. Literally opening the ballots and changing the voting pattern of the person towards Democrats. If the listener, if the viewer were to think this is just isolated cases, think again. This is rife in the country. Otherwise, why would the Democrats and other secularists and other leftists be peddling this idea if they didn't want to manipulate the system in some way, shape, or form?
I thought Americans were against piling on, for the most part, because we have an economy that is just revving, right? And all of a sudden, we get hit with COVID-19. But wait, before that, what did we have? The Mueller investigation.
Yes.
So when that didn't work,
it was Ukraine,
and then COVID, right? And then we shut down the nation.
Right.
We start the nation up again. And what do we get?
Black Lives Matter riots.
Black Lives Matter. BLM. And then when that is, I don't know if it's fizzling out. It seems to be holding on so far. We get another dose of COVID. And just when we thought we got rid of Mueller in Russia, what do we get? It seems that our president and Putin behind the scenes were scheming to kill American soldiers. So at what point does piling on come on the scene and Americans go, wait a minute, this is ridiculous?
At what point do Americans say, let's see, the press is like 0 for 3,757. I don't think I'm going to believe the press anymore. You and I have stated before that many of the faults that our nation encounters now, faces, is the fault of the American voter. Many American voters will blame government, will blame politicians. And yes, we're not saying that politicians and bureaucrats and others are not to blame for many of the ills that America is experiencing now. But let's face it, who placed these people in power? It's the American voter.
I've been told over and over again, Gio, that politics is a local thing. Because you and I have had conversations over the years as to why certain things happen at the federal level and then so completely different at the local level. So I've heard it over and over again. Politics is a local issue. If this is so, then we need to take a look at what is happening at the city of Miami. I'm not saying city of Miami is as big as New York. I always keep an eye out on New York, and I've told people this throughout the years, because a lot of evil just gets pushed out of there, just like England, London. A lot of evil throughout the years, not just now, just, launches itself from there.
It's a central hub.
Absolutely. And Miami is starting to become a place that people pay attention to as to trends, ideas, and groups. And so if we have the time, I don't know that we will have the time, I've got some information on what the city of Miami has done, the latest emergency mandate, which includes exempting people that have a difficult time hearing from wearing their masks. I'm not kidding. I have it in front of me. I have it teed up, so maybe in a few minutes, we can take a look at that. But you sit and you go like, okay, a mask, and I'm exempt from wearing it because I have problems with my hearing. Yeah, I don't see the association. So now all you have to do, listen, folks, if you come down to Miami, you don't want to wear a mask, then all you have to do is when the cop approaches you, ignore him.
That's it.
And then when he faces you, you go, oh, you can walk. You don't need a mask. You have a problem with your hearing? What? Problem with hearing. You can go.
Or simply wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, and you're well on your way to be exempt.
I'm not exaggerating. I've got a copy of the ordinance and what it will cost people if they go, let's say, after the first warning. They're probably keeping a list from what I can tell. You're going to get a verbal warning. You have to wear your mask. And they see you again. If Officer Rodriguez sees you again, then he's going to hit you with a $50 fine. And then after that, you have to promise him that you will go to court. It's a promise. You make a promise to go to court.
I'm pretty pleased. Fingers crossed. With a cherry on top.
But then again, if you want to avoid all of that, you just, you play coy, you act out the part, you go, and you don't have to wear a mask.
Exactly.
And so these are the things that are happening. And I straddle this to what you were saying, because how come none of these things are applied to the protesters?
Well, exactly. And then all of these things are applied stringently to churches. And then when you ask the rhetorical question, why is it that the audience believes that all of these onerous regulations, mandates, are specifically against the Church of Jesus Christ? Look at what's happening in California. Look at what has happened in New York City and other places. You'll have people who will play coy, even though they know what the answer is. These people that are in power inherently hate the gospel of Jesus Christ. They hate Christianity. And they disguise their hatred of the Church of Jesus Christ and of Christianity behind public safety. These are mandates for public safety, but when you see that they are specifically targeting Christian churches using COVID-19 and everything else as an excuse for which to repress churches, I think it becomes rather evident to what their end game is. If you can't see, if any person can't see why people like Newsom, de Blasio, Francis Suarez over in my city of Miami, etc., are doing these things specifically against churches, then there's nothing we can do to help you. I think it's more willful ignorance than anything else.
And then the duplicity burns you up inside, because as the elections approach, I get the calls. Could we use your building?
Yeah, that's true.
What do you want the building for? We'd like to place some voting machines there. No, you can't use our building. Please. It's in a real nice setting, and we would like to use your building.
And they even dangle some cash.
Yes. It's a worthless amount because it's an all-day event. Just the electricity alone is more, you use up more money than they're giving you. I think they give you $400 and something. And they says, well, we'll build a ramp and everything for the handicap. And then the ramp sits there a couple of months because, yeah, we'll get to you when we get to you. So when you say no, now they're upset at you. But then, we get even closer to voting time. The mayor would like to send someone from his staff to visit the congregation and just shake hands and remind them how great he's been for the Christian community. Because, he has been great for the Christian community. So on Sunday, he showed his greatness on our behalf by doing what? Sending officers to our place of worship.
Exactly. I mean, I remember, and I know some people will listen. Some of our audience is obviously from Miami, others are not, but this is happening nationwide. We're just using this as an example to showcase the level of tyranny that has arrived on our shores in a constitutional republic, one would think. I remember reading a few days ago where Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez said that he instituted the mask mandate after he was driving around the city and saw tons of people not wearing their masks, and therefore he decided to enforce the matter. Which
Remember, he wanted to send observers into the cities or the county's parks.
Exactly.
And then find those people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, who does this guy think he is, perched atop his position where he is responsible? He's supposed to be responsive to the people that put him in power, where now he thinks that he can use executive power to tell people to wear a mask. What's it to him whether or not people wear a mask? Well, it's in the interest of public safety. We continue to return to the analysis that you brought back a couple of days ago. Those that are wearing masks, why are they seeking for government to impose a mask mandate if they are already safe? If they feel the false sense of security, because that's what it is, a false sense of security behind the mask, why are they seeking to impose on others that they ought to wear a mask as well? Aren't they protected already?
Plus, we've been told over and over again, the mask will not protect you. What you are doing is protecting others.
Speaking about flip-floppers, the CDC has flip-flopped on that, I think, 1,730 times already.
Exactly.
And Fauci as well.
Exactly.
The Dr. Doom, I think Breitbart is
all
calling
these people must think that they are carriers.
That's a good question, because usually you wear masks so as to not infect another person.
That's right. You don't want to spread that.
Right.
So if you are a spreader, you wear it.
But it's curious because
But then they're wearing a mask, I'm not wearing a mask, and they go, stop, don't get close to me. Wait a minute. You're the one that's contaminated. You wearing the mask. You're telling me without saying a word, careful with me.
Exactly.
I'm spreading stuff.
Exactly. But this is...
It's crazy.
It's
what it
lunacy.
is.
Exactly.
It's the nuttiness of the whole thing.
Agreed. That's how crazy things have become.
I've been told over and over and over again, even the CDC has said this, really, If you wear a mask and that thing is out there and it's close to you, it's gonna get
It's
you.
going to find a way. These
It's gonna get you.
these when you're talking about biology here, microbiology more specifically, these molecules are so small. They're in the millions. These particles are in the millions. They will find a way to enter into the small openings
Plus,
that
they're
you have.
smart. Remember, the president of Venezuela and one of his assistants said that it was designed to kill Latinos and blacks.
He did say. So the Chinese designed a Hispanic black killing virus.
There is a smart ship, and now we have a smart virus. So the point being, Gio, that you wear the mask, right? Because you're contaminated. Because we've been told over and over again, if you wear a mask, please don't feel safe. You're not really protected. So what you're doing is you're wearing a mask just in case you are contaminated, and you go about your business ensuring that you don't contaminate others. Well, that seems pretty good. You don't know if you have it. You could be asymptomatic for all you know. And there you go, just popping your peas and getting loud and droplets are flying everywhere. So that's a great idea. Yeah, wear the mask. Okay, so I sit at a restaurant and the waitress is tired of the mask. And she goes, and she takes a break, right? And she pulls it like this and she's handling that thing all over. And then she's getting my coffee and my water, and I'm going like, She thinks she's safe, and she thinks she's keeping me safe, and she just handled the inside, the outside, the edges. She handled her face. She handled everything, including my meal, my mug, the coffee. She handled everything. And I'm supposed to feel safe. So you know what I do now? I carry around a little bottle like this, full of alcohol, and I go
and start spraying it everywhere.
It's a little curtain of protection. And they look at me like, what is wrong with this guy?
I have a barrier mist or a mist barrier surrounding me.
That sounds like a rock band.
That wouldn't be a bad name for a rock band, actually.
So that's where we're at.
Well, we wanted to give our prognostications, our sentiments on where we think this is headed, because, I mean, one of the most disgusting things that we have seen, one of the most pitiful and pathetic things that we have seen, are how some, and I use this again in quotation marks, and I'll use them in air quotation marks as well, Christian leaders. I hate using that phrase. I mean, I absolutely detest that phrase, because these people think that they can have Jesus abdicate his position as the King and Lord and Savior of his church, of his bride, and say, no, we'll take your position. We'll lead for you. Just please move off to the side. We'll tell the church what to do. I just can't stand that phrase, Christian leaders. Anyways, that's a phrase.
Would you prefer like vice kings? They would take that.
They would take that, absolutely. And they'll still tell Jesus to move over. Abdicate your position. Take a seat. So what happens is we see these people bending the knee to the mob. They didn't go out. They didn't protest the onerous regulations and tyrannical, despotic mandates from the local municipalities and the states against churches, against shutting down churches. They didn't raise a stink about that. They did not decide to protest.
No, to the contrary. Now they're embracing BLM to the point that they are collecting money for them when BLM is finally unmasking itself. And what are they saying? We are trained
Marxists. Yes.
And we are mostly pushing for trans rights.
And to destroy, what do they call it? Heteronormative norms, which means God's design for the family. One man,
they
one
even
woman.
hate women that think that trans, guys that think they're females. Right. They even hate females that don't approve of that.
And then it's also found that the vast majority, I almost think 99.64%, if I'm not mistaken. I'm quoting Raheem Kazam over from Breitbart, if my mind doesn't fail me. They did an analysis. The vast majority of the donations that are given to Black Lives Matter are heading directly into the coffers of the Democratic Party. So, I mean, you even have churches, corporations, and others picking up money, donating money, giving money to this organization that is inherently helping the Democrats, trying to destroy the country with their inherent secularism. Now,
can I interrupt?
Of course.
Since 1964, this country has been having that important conversation about race. And you and I have had conversations about race, and we've explained that we should be talking about ethnic groups. So, nevertheless, just so we won't have to open so many parentheses, we've been having a conversation since 1964, right?
Yes.
What happens when the LGBT movement came on the scene and they started barking up that road, barking up that tree? This is an issue of civil rights. You will recall, Gio, that I told you they're going to hijack this.
Hijack the language that blacks
civil
used.
rights.
Right.
And some people
The language and the imagery.
looked at us and said, these two guys are just like we thought, crazy. Look at it today.
We were vindicated.
Absolutely. They're saying it out loud. It's mostly about black trans people.
And these are the organizations that these churches, these so-called Christian leaders, are supporting.
And so we bring it back to your point. We are supposed to bend the knee, apologize. According to Kathy, we have to shine the shoes.
Dan Cathy from Chick-fil-A.
Yes. Ask for forgiveness and be willing to pay reparations, even for sins that you and I have nothing to do with.
Although he wasn't willing to commit to give shares of Chick-fil-A stock to Lecrae.
He was not. He
didn't want to show us the way on that, right?
No.
So what we have then are these so-called church leaders, and I use that term with all intention, so-called church leaders actually helping the very secularists who are trying to drown out, if not, let's go further with that, destroy the Church of Jesus Christ.
At the end of the day, it's about destroying the Judeo-Christian system that has kept this country going and strong, and we have been the envy of the world.
And when one thinks about it, that is communism in a nutshell. The state is God. You shall have no other gods before thee except the state. That's one of the things that you and I have spoken about before that we don't understand from certain Christians. When they criticize people like ourselves and others whom dare to say the truth, why are you speaking about politics? Why are you speaking about these societal issues? Why are you even speaking about these things from the pulpit? Well, the church, Paul says, is the pillar and ground of truth. It is the beacon of truth. We're supposed to speak truth, biblical truth, in all spheres of life. It doesn't matter whether it's so-called in the political sphere. And again, I use that term so-called. Some people get tired of me using it. But let's face it, everything that happens in the political sphere is downstream from culture. It's a reflection of what happens in culture. So everything that is legislated eventually comes downstream from culture. And where else are Christians, the Bible, the church, supposed to speak to other than cultural, societal issues? This is all, folks, when we're dealing with God's mandate, God's design for humanity, the church has to speak to that. So please, don't write us any more letters. Don't go around behind our backs telling other people that, the pastor and Gio and others who are like them shouldn't be speaking about these things, because truth is truth, no matter what ambiance is used to try to drown out truth and trying to drown out the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's like the issue of abortion. Everyone says, or not everyone, I shouldn't generalize that way. Most people who see things wrongly, the church shouldn't speak on this issue. What are you talking about? When we're talking about God's design, meaning life, the church has to speak to that issue directly.
If we pay attention to all the things that we are told, don't deal with that, that either, then we automatically understand we must have something important to say on all these matters, because they're asking us to do what? Keep quiet about it.
Keep quiet, exactly.
I've been telling any and all who would listen, we must take over the educational system again. Otherwise, the Marxists are going to take over. Sure enough, they've taken over. The same with Hollywood. And so what you have now is a very difficult situation where people have been so indoctrinated that they can't see reality.
Yes.
They see whatever doctrine has been placed in their minds. Like if this country is so bad, hates blacks so much, why are so many Africans wanting to come here?
Exactly.
Oh, this country will just destroy you if you are a Latino. So why are they getting, what do they call that train? The monster? What do they call it? They load
From
that
Mexico,
thing.
yes.
And they're just wanting to get themselves over here.
No
Because
barriers on the southern border of the United States.
they must be masochists. And so we speak about these things, And after you pronounce them, after you share them, you think they got it. No, they want to stone you. They've been indoctrinated. And when you have been indoctrinated, brainwashed, that's kind of a contradictory term. When your mind has been polluted, reason doesn't stand a chance.
That's true.
You've got this way of looking at things, and so you no longer weigh things out. Discernment is gone. And where does this happen? I would say at the high school level and at the college level. How long have you been saying this, Martinez?
Decades.
You're in the middle 30s now, right? In your middle
Yes.
30s. I think you've heard me talking about this for at least 25 years
Decades.
since you were a small boy.
Yes, decades.
Yep.
That's the fact of the matter.
We had one Mexican brother in the Lord, and he is a staunch conservative, right? And the wife said, "Can you just talk to him? He is in a state of depression. That's what they call it now. He is so sad. I'm scared for his health and his well-being." And what did we point out to him? This was many years ago. He was headed back to California, was it?
Yes.
He says, "What can I do? How can we flip this? How can we turn this?" Well, first of all, you go to the patron saint of the flip-floppers, and he'll show you his high wisdom on the
Saint
matter.
John the Roberts.
That's right. Take over the schools.
Yes,
Pull your kids out.
exactly.
Because it boggles the mind that you can tell a dad, a mom, if you continue to send your kids to these particular schools, by the time they get out of high school, they will have no respect for you at all.
No
And
respect for Christianity.
Exactly. And they will start challenging you. And after 4 years in college, they will probably hate you.
The indoctrination is such where the system has been built to inherently teach the hatred of Christianity.
Absolutely. And then mom and dad, they're thinking, we're going to lose our baby. So they capitulate. And they go, yeah, I guess I need to rethink my position. Christ was probably wrong, and your professor is probably correct on all things. So I will be changing my views because it's my little daughter. It's my baby. I don't want to lose her. I don't want her to leave the house. I want to make her happy, content, and so therefore I'll think like she thinks. And you lost a generation, and now what do you do?
When you say that we have to retake the school in particular, and you just mentioned it, basically saying that parents ought to be the ones to once again retake the responsibility of educating their children.
Absolutely. You think these guys, tenured professors, you think they're going to budge from their position? First of all, they're convinced that their version of communism will work because all the others that have failed because it's not their version.
Version 3.7555175.
Yes. And once it's implemented, then it'll work. And so they're not going to move. And the duplicity once again is there, except that when you are indoctrinated, you don't see it. So, professor, since we believe in sharing and equal distribution of things, why don't you equally distribute A's to all of us, even unto those who disagree with you? Out! Can you take a pay cut for 6 to 12 weeks and share your salary?
Share the wealth.
Can I disagree with you publicly?
It's true.
But you know that only a few students put up that fight. The rest sit there and they go like, yeah. And then when they go home, they repeat, they regurgitate all that day after day, and it comes to that point where mom and dad will have that private conversation, maybe over dinner by themselves, or when the little baby is not at home, or at night. We have to stop talking about this, or let's just get an agreement with our little boy, otherwise we're going to lose him. You already lost him.
That's it.
When did you lose him? Way back there in high school.
Was
you
it?
Lost him when you gave him up to the system.
What was it that we were saying earlier today? How is it possible, especially Christians, to be surprised when they turn over their children to Caesar and they come back to them Romans?
I want to be called Little Caesar. Why you want to sell pizza? I just want to be called Little Caesar.
I want to play the
Pizza,
fiddle
pizza.
while Rome burns just like Nero.
I like a haircut like this. Put a bowl on me.
The soup bowl cut, right?
The bowl cut, yeah.
So, the question is then, knowing where we're at now, seeing what we've stated up until this point, seeing the dire straits that much of the church in North America is. In other words, those at the top, those that are most visible, those that they use Christ and the gospel as a platform for their own popularity and to teach false doctrine because they're looking more for popularity, seeker friendliness, as it were, than anything else. I know many Christians because they've communicated with me, they've communicated with you, that are absolutely disheartened over that. And we keep telling them, I think one of the solutions that we've provided to these people is don't focus your attention and don't give your confidence, don't place your trust on these people. The Bible very clearly states that you ought to place your trust exclusively on the person and work of Jesus Christ. And then once you see that people are operating correctly under his economy for the church, then you begin to say, well, this is a person, for example, this is a pastor, this is an institution, a ministry that I understand that they are disseminating truth, and therefore I'll pay attention to them. Because otherwise, if they continue to place their trust on these people whom are the most popular and the popularity seekers and the capitulating compromisers of our day and age, they will be deceived. I mean, that's already bad to begin with. They will be deceived, but also they will be let down because these people are not in any way, shape, or form looking to be like Daniel and his compatriots, where they are uncompromising in their positioning in Christ. They will compromise even the last iota of the gospel to maintain their popularity and the money that they're reaching and to be part of the conference circuits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what we're saying here with respect to what we are saying that is going to happen from here on out, I think there will be, let me put it this way. I used it recently in a post that I had placed on Parler. Yes, we are on parler.com, by the way. And it's this. I think it's becoming clearer in North America and the United States what Matthew 13 states when Jesus talks about the parable of the wheat and the tares. In particular, when you take that parable and you apply it, it applies to the church. Specifically, the pretenders versus those whom truly are of Christ. But you'll notice that the person whom sowed the seeds, when the enemy came in the middle of the night and had spread the seeds of the tares, his servants had said, do we rip them all up? No. Don't rip up the tares, because you also run the risk of ripping up the wheat, as it were. Give it time. Eventually, when the harvest comes, we'll be able to differentiate one from the other. When you apply that to the church, in essence, what Jesus is telling you, that in the church age, eventually there will come a point where you will see people that belong, people whom are of the true body of Christ, and those whom have been pretending all along. The contrast will become clear as time comes on. And I think this world that we're currently inhabiting, post or in the midst still of the lockdowns and of the repression against the church, etc., and from all these movements, has made it clear whom is with us, whom is against us. And I believe, this is just what I think is the biblical mandate for all of this, is that Christians now ought to depart from churches that are pretenders and seek fellowship with those that are of the true body of Christ.
Well, you ask, where are we headed? I think in these United States, we are headed towards a state church. Of course, I'm going to get phone calls and letters saying, you imbecile, you. Haven't you heard about the separation of church and state? I have. That's part of the problem. So what do you mean by a state church? Well, this is exactly what I mean. Certain ideas, certain philosophical points of views, ideologies will be embraced. And if you as a Christian, you as a Muslim, you as a Buddhist, embrace that, you'll be left alone. And so even though there is no particular group, or maybe it will form, maybe it will come to pass.
Something more ecumenical?
Exactly. That will be the church state. Or the
state church.
Yeah, the state church. The church will enjoy the blessing of the state. And by that I mean all these groups that come together under that banner. Real Christians, that small flock that Christ talked about, I guess their buildings will be smaller. Maybe more will have to congregate
at home,
at home.
which is happening now.
But this is where I think we're headed. If you follow the mandate of the state, you will be allowed to worship according to what they prescribe. If you go away from that by, for example, staying true to the Bible, to Scripture, there's a problem for you. You might not be able to get on Facebook. You might be able to use Twitter, because now you're propagating what? Hate.
Hate speech.
And so we got to keep an eye on you. I think that's where we're headed. I think we're not that far away from that.
It's already happening as we speak.
Yes.
I mean, we were just mentioning it towards the more or less the second half of this program. How we're not the only ones whom have experienced this sort of persecution. There have been other churches that have experienced. I mean, we're talking about heavy-handed, really, really heavy persecution in the United States over this issue of COVID-19 or whatever they want to call it, coronavirus, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen how mayors, governors, and others. I mean, look at Kentucky, for example. Kentucky, a state that most people think it's deep red. They voted for a Democrat to become their new governor. Brashear, what did he do at the beginning of all this? We're disallowing churches to gather. And if you gather, we're going to levy heavy fines and even threaten you with jail time if you decide to open churches again. Folks, it's happening. What you're mentioning, I'm mentioning this because there are people, again, that the disbelievers, as it were, whom would say that would never happen in the United States. It already has
The
happened.
mayor of Houston was asking for copies of pastors' sermons.
To see how much political content it contained.
Exactly. So what do you mean it can't happen here?
The contact tracers in California.
There you go.
Newsom was sending them in plain clothes, by the way, in plain clothes so that they can infiltrate the churches to see if they were complying with the dictators of California's mandates. So it's already happening. The siege for that tyranny against the Church of Jesus Christ in North America, in the United States, is already happening as we speak, to your point.
I think thought, what you're thinking, your ideas, your philosophies, ideologies, doctrines, will be judged by the state. And if you are not in compliance with what the state mandates, you will be shut down. You're asking where are we headed, and that's what I see.
Yes.
And so COVID-19 is just a lab, and they're learning from this. How far can we take people?
Yes.
How far are they willing to allow us to push them around and place them in corners? And of course, today it's something virulent. This is a disease. You got to take care of yourself. But tomorrow it could be what you're thinking.
It's happening already.
Exactly. But I mean, in a more oppressive, a more open way. We're doing it, and what are you going to do about it?
Exactly.
Like in the city
yeah,
of...
remember, you're called to turn the other cheek.
Well, in the city of Miami, it's not just the police that are going to be keeping an eye on you as it pertains to wearing the mask. It's code enforcement.
Exactly. Well, they said, if I'm not mistaken, Francis Suarez, he said recently that code enforcement is going to go even to restaurants and whatnot, and anyone that is seen not obeying the mandate, they will shut down that business.
And so what do you have after that?
Really, that's already tyrannical to begin with.
Once your livelihood is threatened,
Yes.
either legally, illegally, by force, by making you submit to something that you don't believe in, or you find that to be unconstitutional, that's it. You've been shut down, and now you're basically forced to take the government's handout. And many Christians are saying, yeah, I'll take those 1,200, and can you make it 2,000 next time?
The Rubicon has been
Just
stepped
let
on.
me be. Just let me be. If people want to take the risk of coming in here and, doing the right thing, keeping the distance, not coughing on each other, etc., let me be. No. We tell you when you can open and how many people you can have in there. And of course, they've got the perfect excuse. You've got a virus going on.
And then here's the other thing. Now you have secularists piling on. These very same people whom attack the scriptures, quoting scriptures to Christians, rebuking them, lecturing them sanctimoniously about their Christian duty. Love thy neighbor. Wear a mask. So, as I heard recently a pastor expostulate, so if I'm not wearing a mask, am I committing a sin?
Well, I take it one step further. If some of these people make it to heaven like they think they are going to make it to heaven, will they approach Jesus and tell him, we have to do something about these streets made of gold? We have to redistribute this.
You're not sharing the wealth. It's not being dispensed adequately.
Pearly gates. What were you thinking?
That's true.
This is like a Jewish city. What were you thinking?
It's too luxurious.
Absolutely.
You're showing your white privilege.
Yeah, absolutely.
In this case, it'd be Middle Eastern privilege. So we'd like to end this podcast episode with a word of exhortation. You've taught this for years. I've learned this from you. Yes, it's important to point out deficiencies and to bring correction where it's necessary. That's what the ethics of the Bible teaches us. Yes, correction is there, but the solution, so as to implement that correction and the exhortation, the uplifting, the building, you were talking about that on Sunday, about edifying people.
Correction is a manifestation of love.
Exactly. And
if you don't manifest love, if you say, I have it, it's in here somewhere, I'll just find it in a few minutes. You're lying to yourself and to people. When you correct people, you're actually loving them.
Exactly. So your advice with what Christians should expect post-COVID-19 in this world that is ever-changing, what should Christians do? What should biblical believers expect and it become the new normal for them, biblically speaking, of course, still keeping in mind what the Bible teaches? How do they go about, for example, if they notice that their local congregations are like the Osteens of life, like the Hillsongs of life, right?
Start by building the home altar. Make sure you get together frequently. I'm not going to put a number on it. Should we do it Monday through Sunday? I'm not going to put a number on it. Frequently. Pray together. Study scriptures together. Start there. 2, don't give up your kids to these Marxists. These people that hate God. They absolutely hate God. They hate Christianity. They hate any and all things biblical. Don't give up your kids to them. Don't sacrifice them. I have to, my wife and I have to work. We have 3 TVs and 2 cars.
3 TVs?
How do we keep up with that?
The TVs are more expensive than the cars.
Sell the TVs and maybe get rid of 1 car, but do not sacrifice your kid's soul.
But we can't do that, you see, Pastor,
I get
because
it,
we
yeah.
need those material goods, because we worship at the altar of materialism and we're willing to sacrifice our children and our souls to Moloch.
Look, if you don't take control of your life, if you allow the system to just move you along like it's moving many Christians, and like you pointed out so properly, so to the point that now we're being asked to give to BLM, and we already proved what they're all about. I think we showcased that, we exhibited that, we manifested that. If you don't take control of your life, then you're lost.
Yes.
And what do you mean take control of my life? Well, if Jesus is your Lord, then lordship, the lordship of Christ should be important to you. And you go back to the Bible and you ask God to show you the things that you are supposed to be following.
Whoever loves me, whoever wishes to be my disciple will keep my commandments.
And you do that and you will be okay. But you can't tell me you love your kids and then you give them up, 6, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, year after year, and expect after 10 years of that, 12 years of that, and then 2, 4, 6 of, college courses and universities, that at the end they will go like, I love God like never before.
I'm ready to suffer like Daniel and his companions.
I hate you, Mom. I hate you, Dad. I hate God. I hate everything. I hate this country. And that's what you're going to get. So if you don't get a hold of that, then don't be surprised when you get this other product.
But it has to begin in the personal level. I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying.
And I agree with you. It starts with the personal.
If the person themselves has no prayer life, for example, if they have no intimate relationship with God, if they don't seek Him, if they don't seek to abide by His word, how can you teach that then to your children? Your children are going to call you a hypocrite themselves. Of course, that's not liberating the children. That's not freeing the children from the responsibility that they have before their Maker. Because at the end of the day, when we're speaking about the dispensation of grace, we're all responsible individually before Christ to acknowledge Him, repent of our sins. We understand that.
And I agree with you 100%. It starts with the individual, because if somebody walks up to a lot of Christians now and they tell them something more or less along these lines, how can you not love homosexuals? It's just 2 dudes that love each other. Isn't Christ love? Isn't God love? And they'll go, I don't have an answer for that.
They don't have an answer for it.
And that proves what you're pointing out. They don't have fellowship with the Father. They don't have a relationship with Christ, because if they did, they would have an answer for that.
Or intimate knowledge of what the scriptures teaches.
But it comes with your personal relationship with Christ.
Exactly, and submitting to his mandates.
Yep.
So I think again, some people, I've also heard this accusation, man, Pastor and Gio, you spend a lot of time delineating what's wrong, and then you don't spend a lot of time on
giving
solutions.
solutions.
We are giving solutions, and the thing is, as I've stated beforehand, disentangling, as it were, the problems, and bringing the correction, it's like that because sin entangles you. Guess what? God's solutions, God's will for our lives, it's simple.
I've been giving solutions since the program started. You come to the city of Miami, you don't want to wear a mask. What did I tell them?
Yes.
Fake that you're deaf and dumb.
Exactly.
Except you can't say deaf and dumb.
Yes, because now you're insulting.
Yes, you
both.
won't be politically correct. So you got to fake that. You got to fake that you're politically correct. But what's behind all that? I tuned in late. What's behind all that? Well, in the city of Miami, you have to wear a mask everywhere, in any and all public spaces, except if you have difficulty with your hearing.
So all you have to do then is wear a Black Lives Matter T-shirt. Now pay attention when the cop screams that you, rebukes you, chastises you
If
for
you
not
wear
wearing
a
a mask.
BLM T-shirt, you're already stating that you're
Well,
deaf
but
and
if
dumb.
your back is
What?
to him, if your back is to him, you would turn around and say, "Black Lives Matter." That's it.
Or wear the emblem on both sides.
On both sides, exactly. So you're good.
And then you're deaf and dumb. And you're okay. You won't be warned, fined, or you will not be made to promise that you will appear before a judge. Yeah.
Interesting.
So if I'm deaf and dumb, what is the judge going to do to me?
Exactly.
This guy is deaf and dumb. Why did you bring him to me? You're also deaf and dumb. And it'll be a meeting of deaf and dumb.
Isn't that what's happening in local municipalities when the council members
No, we'll
meet?
be known as dad. Deaf and dumb.
Deaf and dumb.
The dad movement. Here comes another member for dad. What do you mean, deaf and dumb?
Oh, look, the head of them, the mayor. He's here.
Extra deaf and dumb. E-dad. He'll be crowned. So we are giving solutions. What are they talking about?
So he'll join the ranks of St.
But
John
you
the
bring
Roberts.
up a good point, Joe. They always accuse Christians of what you mentioned. You're pointing out the problems, but you never have solutions. We are constantly giving solutions.
Yes.
And it starts with coming back to Christ.
I think the thing is, these people, they complain in that manner because they don't like the fact that the solutions bring them to conviction. What do I mean by that? When the solution is, for example, have Christian courage, stand up against that which tries to silence the gospel. Oh boy, I didn't want to hear that because that brings me to conviction. So therefore, what happens? They begin to launch the ad hominems and attacks that have nothing to do with the central argument, as it were, or the central solution itself. It's all a cover at the end of the day.
It is.
So choose ye today who you will serve.
Absolutely.
That's what it comes down to.
And join deaf and dumb.
And
Join the dad movement.
They're selling memberships for free. As a matter of fact, last I hear, there's millions upon millions of people that have joined up ever since COVID
If
started.
Officer Rodriguez stops you go, oh,
I'm never know.
he's deaf and dumb. Let him go. He doesn't need a mask.
There you have it. There are your solutions. Join deaf and dumb. By the way, the king of deaf and dumb, you're seeing him right here, St. John the Roberts.
We'll probably have somebody up there next week.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, most probably. I think it has become the. This is going to become the pedestal of shame. If you land here, if your caricature lands here, be assured that fire and brimstone will fall
Deaf
upon
and
your
dumb
head
for a week.
Exactly. I'd like to make a few announcements before we end this edition. Pastor was mentioning something that is absolutely important. I think anybody that holds to a biblically Christian ethic can expect in some way, shape, or form to be censored by social media in some way, shape, or form.
It's happening as we speak.
We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, but we continue to tell our audience, stop, please, you need to desist from spending so much time on social media. For other reasons that we've delineated before, social media is not really social. It's there so that you can sell, or rather give away freely metadata, so that these companies like Zuckerberg and other can make money off of you.
Yes.
That's number one. But it's obvious that any voice that is of a Christian bent, or if you're a conservative, a true conservative, they're going to block you out, especially knowing how involved they are in trying to not get Trump reelected. I've even heard people, I don't want to give away certain names, I've even heard people whom are liberals, self-denominated liberals, but whom defend free speech to the end say, I don't expect to last on YouTube, for example, or on Facebook or on Twitter much longer because the repression is becoming ever so evident as the days and the weeks go by.
The St. Louis mayor, she's a Democrat.
Exactly.
And she's been forced. The pressure is multiplying to resign. I don't think she'll do it.
Yeah.
I think she'll be like, no,
Yeah.
just just hold out the pressure. And mind you, you have elects that have not been touched with this. I'm still asking, when is the hammer coming down on Billy Crystal?
Exactly. He played
also
blackface.
known as Sammy Davis Jr.
But he's a Jew. You know that certain Jews just can't be touched because many of them are in positions of power.
I get it.
Oh my goodness, Gio, really? You're one of those? You can call me whatever you want. The fact of the matter is that these things that we're saying are true, and that's why they seek to censor the truth.
In his case, it was artistic. Anybody else? You're
It was
racist.
racism. Exactly, it was racism.
So, why did Jimmy Fallon apologize? And Kimmel?
Yes,
I'm just asking questions.
yes. Rhetorical questions.
I've had that one in my side pocket for a while.
But it's a good point. It's a very good point. So, Gio, what do we do then to fight against the repression of tech tyranny, as it is commonly known? We've already said it beforehand. The public is, in part, well, not really. The major part of the responsibility for giving so much monopoly to the Amazons, the Twitters, the Facebooks of life belongs to the public. If there wasn't so much centralization, people flocking to these places, and then they alluding to them exclusively instead of, for example, visiting atapodcast.org. Oh, that's a shameless plug. Yes, it is. Get used to it. atapodcast.org. You'll also find it if you're watching this at the bottom of the screen. Visit the websites that you know are disseminating truth. We are among those websites. I have no qualms or trepidations in saying that because we know that what we're disseminating is the truth. If you've gotten used to this idea of, but Facebook gives me everything and everyone I follow in a singular place and it's so convenient to me. If you don't understand that they are censoring content that they themselves don't want you to hear, then you know what? Continue to be sheep that gives them your everything. Lamb to the slaughter. Continue to do that. But if you want to know the truth, then you're going to have to go beyond the gatekeepers. Visit atapodcast.org. The way that you communicate with us in the best manner is to visit the website. Also sign up for our email updates. On the website, on the right-hand side, you're going to find a form in which you can subscribe by inputting your first name, last name, your email address. We're not going to spam your inbox. We're not going to sell nor distribute your information to third parties. That's not our style. It's there so that you can keep in contact with the ministry and be aware of when we publish new content. So visit the website frequently, atapodcast.org. Sign up for the email update so you can be alerted as to when we post new content. If you have any questions in particular, any suggestions as to future episodes, write us an email, info@atapodcast.org.
By all means, yeah, we definitely want to get to your letters and answer those questions.
Yes. Pastor also is going to have his own personal inbox, pastor@atapodcast.org. Mine would be GIO @atapodcast.org. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude?
We would likely, I think not likely, we would enjoy if people would suggest who we can bring up on the wall of shame.
We might bring him back, though, because I don't think he's been shamed enough.
Maybe Strom Thurmond.
Or Robert Byrd. Or maybe Joe Biden. He deserves to be on
He
here.
was a Republican, you two. Not before he was a Democrat.
That's right.
From 1954 to 2003. And so maybe we can bring him back as Two-Face.
That's right. The Batman villain.
So by all means, please send your letters, comments, and questions. We'd like to tackle those.
Absolutely. So you'll be able to find all this content again on our website, atapodcast.org. We ask you, don't visit YouTube, don't visit Twitter, visit our website directly for all this content. For God knows, maybe in the very near future, we won't be on those platforms anymore. And also let other people know about the ministry. If you've been informed, if you've been edified, let them know. about us. And soon enough, you'll find on the website that we will have a donation page up. We need your support, especially to fight against the censorship that we are facing internally and externally, as we've mentioned beforehand. That will be up shortly on the website. Well, that's all the time that we have left for this edition. We thank you for listening. We thank you for giving us this time of your day. Very much appreciated. For Pastor Jesus Martinez, this has been Gio. We dismiss ourselves from this edition. Until the next time we meet, may the Lord shine his face upon you.